She said one sentence that changed everything: stay tonight. I'll mark it paid in full. But what she really wanted wasn't money, it was something far deeper. I still remember the weight in my chest that night, the way every step up the staircase felt heavier than the last. Rent was overdue again, and I didn't have the courage, or the money, to make it right. My landlady wasn't the kind of woman you could fool or dodge. She was in her early 40s, confident in that quiet, graceful way that made people straighten their shoulders when she looked at them. Beautiful, yes, but not the kind of beauty that shouts. It was the kind that lingers, the kind you notice in the way she carried herself, how her eyes could pin you still without a single word. Her apartment door stood at the end of the narrow hallway, light spilling out beneath the frame. I paused there, palms damp, rehearsing some excuse in my head. None of them sounded convincing, not even to me. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles touched the wood, the door opened. She stood there, dark hair pulled back, silk blouse falling neatly against her shoulders, the faintest hint of perfume drifting out with the warmth of the room. Her eyes went straight to mine, then down to the envelope I wasn't holding. The silence stretched. I swallowed hard. "You're late," she said, her voice calm but carrying weight, like a gavel striking softly. "I know," I managed, forcing a half-smile that didn't convince either of us. I just need a little more time." Her arms crossed, silk whispering faintly as she shifted her weight. The hallway light caught the curve of her cheek, the sharpness of her brow. She didn't look angry, but she didn't look forgiving either. It was something in between, a test, maybe. I felt my throat tighten. "I'll get it, I promise." She cut me off with a raised hand. Not harsh, not dismissive. Just, final. "Promises don't cover bills," she said. And then, softer, "but I can see you're trying." Her eyes held mine, steady, searching. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, the urge to look away. Instead, I stood there, caught in that silence, with the faint ticking of her wall clock filling the gap between us. She sighed, stepping aside, and her voice lowered into something unexpected, something I didn't yet understand. "Come inside," she said. "We'll talk about it." And just like that, the weight in my chest shifted, not gone, but changing, turning into something else I couldn't name yet. Her living room felt too warm the moment I stepped inside, like the air itself was holding its breath. The soft glow of a standing lamp painted everything in gold and shadow, the books neatly lined on the shelves, the polished wood floors that carried a faint scent of lemon oil. I stood awkwardly near the door, unsure if I should sit or stay standing. She closed the door quietly behind me. "You don't have it, do you?" she asked, not unkindly, but with a directness that made lying impossible. I shook my head. "Not tonight. I'll figure something out by the end of the week, I promise." Her eyes softened for a moment, though her mouth stayed firm. She moved past me toward the couch, the silk of her blouse catching the lamplight. Every movement of hers seemed deliberate, measured. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she turned back, studying me the way a teacher might study a student fumbling through an answer. "Sit," she finally said, gesturing to the armchair across from her sofa. I obeyed, lowering myself into the chair, my palms still damp against my knees. The silence between us wasn't hostile, but it was thick. I could hear the clock ticking again, louder here, filling every pause. Then she spoke, her voice steady, almost casual, though nothing about it felt casual to me. "You can stay tonight. I'll mark it paid in full." The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Wait, what?" My voice cracked, betraying both disbelief and nerves. Her expression didn't change much, but there was the faintest curve at the edge of her lips. Not a smile, something quieter, something unreadable. "I said you can stay. Consider it taken care of." I searched her face, trying to catch a flicker of hidden meaning. Was she joking? Testing me? Or was this pity dressed up as generosity? I don't want charity, I stammered. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, not in anger, but in thought. It isn't charity. Think of it as an arrangement. The way she said it, calm and deliberate, sent a shiver through me. I couldn't tell if she was being practical or if something else pulsed beneath her words. Her hand lifted to brush a strand of hair from her cheek, the gesture almost unconscious. My gaze followed, catching the glint of her wedding band. No, not a wedding band. Just a plain silver ring, one that suddenly seemed heavy with its own story. I sat frozen, the warmth of the room pressing down on me, the rhythm of my heartbeat filling my ears. And in that moment, I realized this night was not going to end the way I'd expected when I knocked on her door. I hadn't expected her to cook for me. Honestly, I thought the conversation would end with awkward silence and me slipping back to my room, grateful but unsettled. Instead, I found myself at her dining table, the soft flicker of candlelight reflecting off the polished surface. She moved with quiet purpose, setting down plates, arranging silverware, as if this evening had been planned all along. "Sit," she said again, her tone calm but leaving no room for hesitation. I slid into one of the cushioned chairs, my legs stiff with nerves. The smell reached me first, roasted chicken with herbs, garlic mingling with something sweet I couldn't quite name. My stomach tightened, reminding me how little I'd eaten that day. She noticed. "Hungry?" she asked, arching a brow. I nodded quickly, and to my embarrassment, she smiled just a little. "Good. I hate cooking for someone who only picks at their plate." Her voice carried that graceful authority, but under it, a softness lingered. She served me generous portions, the clink of utensils against porcelain filling the silence. When she finally sat across from me, I caught myself watching her too long, the way she brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the faint lines near her eyes that deepened when she concentrated. I reached for the bread basket, and as I did, her hand brushed mine. Warm, steady, and lingering a second longer than necessary. My chest tightened, though I forced myself to focus on the food in front of me. We ate in silence at first, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of things neither of us were saying. The chicken was tender, the herbs strong on my tongue. I let the warmth of the meal ground me, though every time I lifted my gaze, I found hers already waiting. "You don't have to look so nervous," she said gently, sipping from her glass of water. "It's just dinner. Just dinner." But nothing about this felt ordinary. Not the way the candlelight softened the sharpness of her features. Not the way her voice lowered when she spoke, as if she wanted no one but me to hear. I swallowed hard, nodding. "I know. I wasn't expecting kindness tonight." For the first time, her eyes dropped to her plate. A shadow of something, loneliness, maybe, crossed her expression before she quickly masked it. She cut another piece of chicken, her fork trembling ever so slightly. That tiny tremor told me more than her words ever could. She wasn't as unshakable as she seemed. And somehow, that made me feel closer to her than I'd ever thought possible. By the time our plates were mostly empty, the tension between us had shifted. It wasn't heavy anymore, not sharp like before. It had softened, turning into something quieter, like two people slowly realizing they were less alone than they thought. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers curled loosely around her glass. The candlelight flickered across her face, catching the faint creases at the corner of her eyes. They weren't marks of age so much as evidence of a life lived fully, with all its battles and late-night worries. "You know," she said after a long pause, "I never thought I'd still be doing this at my age. Collecting rent. Running after bills. Keeping this place together." Her voice wasn't bitter, but there was a tired honesty in it. I listened carefully, not daring to interrupt. She glanced at me, her eyes softer now. "People think confidence means you've figured it all out. Truth is, sometimes it's just knowing how to hide the parts of yourself you'd rather no one sees." Something inside me stirred at that. I had always seen her as unshakable, this elegant, composed figure who didn't flinch. But now, sitting here with me, she was letting the mask slip just enough for me to glimpse the vulnerability beneath. I cleared my throat. I know what you mean. Everyone my age thinks I've got years to waste, like I can stumble around forever without consequence. But I feel invisible most days. Like nothing I do matters yet. Like I'm just, waiting for my life to start. The admission surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise her. But instead of brushing it off, she leaned in slightly, her elbows resting against the table. Invisible, she repeated softly. Funny. Because right now, you don't seem invisible to me. Her words lingered, heavier than they should have been, but not in a way that made me uncomfortable. More like, they found a place inside me that had been empty for too long. She reached across the table then, slowly, deliberately, until her hand rested over mine. Her skin was warm, her touch light but steady. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was silent except for the steady tick of the clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. Her thumb brushed against my knuckles, almost absent-mindedly, and I felt a spark of something I didn't dare name yet. All I knew was that I didn't want her to pull away. And from the way she lingered, neither did she. After the dishes were cleared, she led me into the living room. I followed, my steps careful, like I might break the spell if I moved too quickly. The room felt different from the dining space, less formal, more personal. A wide sofa pressed against the far wall, a knitted blanket draped neatly across one arm. Framed photographs lined a side table, a younger version of her standing by the sea, another of her with friends, all smiling. They felt like glimpses into a life I'd never been meant to see. She motioned toward the sofa. Sit, she said again, though this time her voice had softened. Almost, inviting. I lowered myself onto the cushion, the fabric cool against my palms. She sat close, not beside me, but close enough that the space between us felt deliberate, measured. The air grew heavy with quiet. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint patter of rain against the window and the steady tick of the clock in the corner. She pulled the blanket lightly across her lap, adjusting it with careful fingers. The scent of her perfume, something warm, like amber and spice, drifted toward me with every shift of her body. Our knees brushed. Just lightly. I froze, expecting her to move away, but she didn't. The contact stayed, subtle yet impossible to ignore. My chest tightened, every breath sharper than the last. I glanced at her, meaning only to steal a look, but she caught me. Her eyes held mine longer than they should have, and in that silence, the room seemed to shrink around us. She reached for her cup of tea from the coffee table. Her hand trembled slightly, barely noticeable, but enough for me to catch it. She steadied it with a small exhale, as though annoyed by her own nerves. I found myself leaning forward before I realized it, my instinct to help, then stopped, realizing how close I already was. The rain grew heavier outside, blurring the world beyond the glass. Inside, the lamplight carved soft edges around her face, turning every line into something luminous. She didn't look away. Neither did I. Words hovered on the edge of the moment, but neither of us dared to give them shape. Instead, the silence stretched, thick, charged, unbroken. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than anything either of us could have said. The silence between us had grown so dense it felt almost fragile, like one word might shatter it completely. She lifted her teacup again, her fingers curled delicately around the porcelain, but I saw the faint tremor return. Before I could think, I leaned forward and reached out. Here, I murmured, steadying the cup as she set it back on the table. My fingers brushed hers, barely a touch, a passing accident. But instead of pulling back, I lingered. The warmth of her skin clung to mine, gentle yet sparking through me like a hidden current. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a moment, it felt as though time had slowed. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just held my gaze with something unreadable, something that made my pulse stumble in my chest. I started to pull my hand away, embarrassed by my own hesitation, but then, she let her fingers close ever so slightly around mine. The touch was small, almost nothing, but it changed everything. "You're kind," she whispered, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You notice things most people overlook." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "You deserve to be noticed." Her lips parted at that, a sharp breath catching quietly between us. The lamplight cast her in warm gold, softening the strength she usually carried. She looked younger in that moment, not in years, but in spirit, as if the weight she wore had lifted just enough to let me glimpse the woman underneath. Her thumb brushed against my knuckles, deliberate this time. Slow. Careful. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain she could hear it. I leaned closer, not enough to close the space, but enough to feel the heat of her presence. Enough to notice the faint scent of jasmine threaded through her perfume. The rain outside tapped against the glass, steady, rhythmic, as though it too was waiting for what came next. But neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved beyond that fragile touch. It wasn't a kiss, wasn't an embrace. It was something smaller, quieter, but far more dangerous, because it carried the weight of everything unspoken. The kind of touch that promises more, but waits for the other to be brave enough to reach for it. The minutes after that touch stretched on, slow and tender, as though the world outside had fallen away. The rain softened to a gentle patter, the steady rhythm filling the room with a quiet calm. She hadn't let go of my hand, and I hadn't wanted her to. It wasn't about rent anymore. It wasn't about obligations or excuses. It was about the rare stillness of two people finding each other in the unlikeliest of places. Finally, she exhaled, a small, almost reluctant sound that carried more weight than words. "Thank you," she whispered, though I wasn't sure what she was thanking me for, helping with the teacup, listening at the table, or simply staying. I shook my head gently. "No. I should be the one thanking you. For tonight. For seeing me." Her eyes glistened faintly in the lamplight, though she turned her face away before the emotion could settle too deeply. She placed her cup aside and shifted closer on the sofa. Not hurriedly. Not nervously. Just a slow, deliberate movement that erased the last space between us. Her shoulder brushed mine, then lingered. My chest tightened, every part of me aware of that closeness. She hesitated for only a moment before resting her hand lightly against my arm, her touch warm and grounding. I met her gaze again, and what I saw there silenced the doubts that had been clawing at me all evening. She wasn't testing me. She wasn't playing some unspoken game. She was letting herself be seen, fully, quietly, with no armor left. Without overthinking, I shifted, allowing her to lean into me. Her arms slipped slowly around my shoulders, her cheek finding its place against my chest. I froze for just a second, stunned by the suddenness of it, and then I let my own arms circle her in return. The embrace wasn't fierce or desperate. It was steady. Whole. I felt the quiet rhythm of her breathing against me, the warmth of her body fitting into the curve of mine. And in that silence, I realized she wasn't just giving me shelter for the night, she was offering me something deeper, something unspoken that felt heavier than any debt I could ever repay. The clock ticked softly, the lamplight glowing gold around us, wrapping the room in a cocoon of stillness. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I felt at home.